Good afternoon and welcome to this training session on Blackboard Ally. Why Ally? So all of us know by now the need for accessibility in course content. But this topic goes beyond accessibility and speaks about universal design, which is adapting your course content to the needs of every learner, which may be very diverse. Now, over the past few years, we have come to terms with some basic rules like videos need captions, not only for those who are deaf, but also for those who may be second language learners, or videos need transcripts for everyone if those videos have technical terms in them. Similarly, we know now that high contrast is a better option for presenting content just because it improves readability. So things like this have now become or are continuing to become common knowledge. But even after all of these changes have been made in a course or in any material, there is still room for improvement, or there may still be barriers that prevent a student from accessing the material to their best advantage. Ally is a way to help in that scenario. So, to put it in another way, your students get alternate formats for your contents only if they ask for it. And if they ask for it as a disability accommodation, then they need to first identify themselves as having a disability. So, this whole process takes time. And even after that, students may not necessarily know their own learning styles. And so they may not know that they may benefit from hearing the content better than just reading it. At the same time, as an instructor, you're trying your best to make your course as engaging as possible for all of your students. So you would benefit from getting feedback from students on your course materials. Unfortunately, that feedback is not very easy to get. Unless you have an instructional designer working with you closely, you may not necessarily know what parts of your course content are simply not accessible to students. Your only bet then is to wait for the end of the semester evals by your students, and those may not be comprehensive enough. So, Ally is a way to get real time feedback about what needs to be fixed. So, that's a bit of a context, and we'll talk more about this through our session today. How Ally can help you and your students. Of course, first of all, it's a tool integrated inside e-learning. So in order to use Ally, you'll need to be inside any learning course or organization. And it is built in accordance with these uh, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which is WCAG, as well as Section 508 standards. Ally does four main things for instructors and students. First, for instructors, it your course for accessibility. So if you have a new course that you're putting together, or if you have a course that has been running from several semesters, doesn't matter. Once you turn on Ally in the course, it'll check your course for accessibility and it assigns accessibility scores for your review. Now, that may sound a little bit uh, stark in the sense an accessibility score, but once we cover it in more detail, you'll see that the purpose of the score is really to give you an indicator of uh, a spectrum. So it's not intended to be a punitive score. It's intended to be a kind of a measure, if you will. So it assigns accessibility scores or indicators for your review only. Second, it tells you what to fix in content identified as being less accessible. So it's not only checking your content, it's also giving you feedback on how to fix that content. And finally, it gives you a course level information about accessibility at the course level. So it lists all the items on your course that need to be fixed in terms of severity. So you can then decide what's critical and needs to be fixed and then work on improving the rest. So it does all of these three things for instructors. And what it does for students is that while you as the instructor is working at your end on making your course more accessible. It gives students alternate formats. Alternate formats are nothing but different presentations of your content. It doesn't alter your content in any way, add or remove anything from what you already have in there. All it's doing is presenting an alternate format of that content so that students can choose the file type that best suits their own learning needs. So students don't see any of the accessibility scores or all of that fun stuff that I showed you in this first section. But what they do see is alternate formats. And that instantly improves their experience, even if you've done nothing in the course, because a PDF is read out to a student with auditory needs. So it's an improvement right from the word go. But again, the alternate formats will depend on the original. So these alternative formats are only as good as the original can be. So we will show you ways to fix your originals as you go by. So I hope I have provided some kind of a framework for what Ally does and how it can help. So now let's take a little more detailed look at this. First, let's talk about what's compatible with Ally, right? So Ally checks, provides alternate formats, and then tells you how to fix issues. It does so in these types of files. Each bullet point represents a file type. So we have PDFs. These could be PDFs that you've sourced from um, a website or maybe from the library, or it could be a PDF that you scanned and attached to your course. It will check Microsoft Word files. It will check PowerPoint files. It also checks OpenOffice or LibreOffice files. This is an authoring tool similar to Microsoft, but it's a free tool. It's used to produce open content, or OER as it's called. If you've produced these types of files and you've attached them to your course, Ally will check them. It will also check HTML files, website content that you've uploaded to your course. It'll check images, all of these image file types. And it'll also check YouTube videos that you may have embedded in your course page. So anything that you've uploaded into e-learning, if it matches any of these file types, Ally will check those file types and tell you what's going on with them. It also checks what's known as the WYSIWYG content. Now, don't be alarmed by this acronym. It stands for what you see is what you get. WYSIWYG. Okay. And what it means is anything that's on the page and nothing beyond it. So think of it like content that you're just displaying, but the student doesn't have to click into it. So in e-learning, it would be an item, for example. What you see is what you get content. Anything that you enter into a content editor is checked by Ally, and it will generate alternate formats for them. But at this point, it doesn't show you how to fix accessibility issues in them. So as we go through today's session, we'll give you some tips on how to fix this type of content. But Ally checks it as well. So this is a brief rundown of what's compatible with Ally and what you can expect to get feedback on. Okay. Moving on, let's now talk in more detail about how Ally can help. So as I said, there are 4 things Ally does. And alternate formats for students is the first item. So let's look a little bit more in detail about what are these alternate formats. So the alternate formats, as I said, are not altering your content. They're just Ally converted versions of your content. So the first type of alternate format is the audio. Ally will generate, where possible, MP3 files with headers as playlists of your content. Here there's a limit of 100,000 characters. And according to the Blackboard trainer who walked us through this process, that amounts to approximately 37 to 39 pages of text or 2.5 hours of speech. Up to this limit, Ally can convert your file into an MP3 file so students can listen to it. Second, it can convert files into electronic braille. So this would be a BRF file format, and students would be using a braille reading device in order to access this content. Third is called the EPUB. This is a digital publishing file that can be viewed on a mobile device, and the content adapts to the device it's viewed on. So if you look to the image to the right, the image on the right is an example of the EPUB file, whereas you can see hovering on the content and clicking on the alternate format produces the format in this, produces the content in this little box, which will modify itself to any device the student is holding. The next file type is the semantic HTML. What this does is it takes your content and flattens all the main elements like block codes, paragraphs, and headings. It adds all these elements to help screen readers make sense of the content. It structures your content, and we will show you examples of that as we go by. This is just like HTML content. Semantic HTML is also viewed in a browser. And so that means it is responsive to browsers. It will automatically wrap itself around any device. So that's the fourth type of content. And all of these alternate formats are generated on demand. So the student has the option to select which one they want, and they can download that onto their device and access it that way. Let's see a few more. The fifth one is OCR, or optical character recognition. So this is when your PDF was actually an image. Ally will try to make sense of that PDF and try to convert it into searchable text, because the main thing is not just giving a context of the material, but also helping your learners search through it if they want to search for a specific keyword or a section. That's what it's trying to do here. So if your PDF is an image, Ally can create an OCR PDF of it. But again, there's a caveat here. The conversion is only as good as the quality of the original. So when we go to our demo piece, we will show you examples of how this works in a real scenario. So this image on the right is an example of optical character recognition. It's the same content, but it's laid out in a way that's easier for the student to recognize. And then you have what's called the tagged PDF. So you'll notice there were three PDF support files. The purpose of these alternate formats is to add meaning to the page and help your students search through the page if they're using a screen reader. Next, we have what's called the translated version. Now, this is a machine translated version of the original content in other languages. Blackboard has a database of 50 languages. And the file types supported here are Word, PowerPoint, PDF, and HTML. And the caveat they have added here is that it depends on the type of language, technical terms included in the file itself, sentence structure, and local colloquialism. Because this is machine translated, it's not 100% accurate. But if you upload the content and hide it from students and look at the alternate format yourself, you'll get an idea of if it's good or not. But it's available. Then there's the Beeline reader. The Beeline reader is a new concept that has been adapted very widely by many countries. And it recognizes the fact that some readers need a guide to help them keep track of where they are on the page. So what the Beeline reader does is it just adds a subtle color gradation to the text that helps pull your eye through the reading. So if you to draw your attention to these two images on the right, the one at the top is a Beeline reader for a web page. And you'll notice, or you might notice ever so slightly, the color gradient changing. The purpose of that is so that the reader can keep track of where they were, especially if there's a lot of text on there. Similarly, at the bottom, you'll notice a few more options at the top. The reader has the option to change the gradients to bright, dark, and so on, just so that they can decipher it at their end. But this option is also available. And the last option is the library reference. And this is really neat because if you provide a library reference information for your content, then students will be directly taken to that reference on the screen under alternative formats. So they can go to the source directly. And this is a best practice that we would also highlight to you as we go by. Wherever possible, try to find the original if it's already there in the library or your publisher has an original. Use those originals because chances are they are already formatted for accessibility. So this was a rundown of the various types of alternate formats available that Ally will generate to your content as is. Okay. So that was a brief rundown of alternate formats. Next, the next three items are for the instructor. So this is instructor help. So let's talk about what Ally can do for you as the instructor. The first thing is accessibility indicators or scores. Now, let me begin by saying or reiterating, let's say, that this is not visible to students. This is only for the instructor. So I'm saying this because many instructors were concerned when we piloted Ally earlier that these scores would be visible to students. That's not the case. The only time it will be visible to students, and this is what the Blackboard trainer told us, very valuable information, is if you're sharing your screen, your e-learning screen, that's when students will see those indicators. But if you want to share your screen, e-learning screen with your students, and you use the student preview, they're not going to see it. So that's just a little tip if you're concerned. But if you look to the image on the right, this is what accessibility indicators look like. Every content on your e-learning page will have something like this against it. And it's a spectrum, so it's not a good, bad, pass, fail sort of a thing. It's more of a spectrum. So per Ally's algorithm, low accessibility indicators would mean that this needs immediate attention. And your accessibility level for this content is 0 to 33%. That's Ally's algorithm. Medium would indicate that it's good for now, but you may need to pay further attention to it, edit it some more. A high accessibility indicator means it's good, but you can still improve it further. And then you'll see here it's 67 to 99. And perfect means Ally didn't find anything wrong with it. But that does not mean that there's no room for improvement. For example, Ally can check that your images have a description. And if they do, Ally will give it a thumbs up. But it's possible though the descriptions are incorrect or inaccurate and Ally doesn't check that. So even if something is perfect, there could still be room for improvement. So when we go into our demo, you'll see this in more detail, but every content that I described in a couple of slides back, every compatible content will have a score indicator next to it that tells you uh, its status in terms of accessibility, how accessible it is. And then when you hover your mouse over it, Ally will give you those guidelines on how to fix it. Okay. So that brings us to the next point, guidelines. How to fix those issues that were discovered. So the image to the right indicates the help box that Ally gives you. When you hover your mouse on that indicator that I showed you in the previous screen, Ally then pops up a box like this, which will tell you, okay, your content is 47% accessible, which means it's in the orange zone. Now, here are the issues that were found with it, and here's what you need to fix. So we will go over this in more detail, but I'm just pointing this out to you so that you know what to expect. You will then be able to see a list of all the issues with that file, and it will be, you will have tips on how to fix each of them. And then you have a box here to upload the fixed version of the file back so that it's replaced. So it's very uh, intuitive to follow those directions. So this is what you can expect to see when it comes to guidelines. But as I said earlier, your original is what really matters. So if you're creating your content afresh, then there are some things you may be able to do before you upload your contents into e-learning that's going to minimize these fixes. So what we've done here is we've given a list of typical fixes that you can expect to see in Ally and how to fix them. Now, these come from our experience working with Ally over the past couple of years, as well as more intensively for the past few months preparing for this training. We've worked on several types of files and come up with a list of what are the main things Ally asked us to fix and how it's fixed, as well as some points that Blackboard gave us during their training. So here we go. What are the typical fixes? Now, remember, Ally will tell you all this as well. So even if your files didn't have any of these fixes and you uploaded them into Ally, you will still have the opportunity to fix them there. But if you just use the inbuilt accessibility checkers in Microsoft, you're almost ready to go. Or in some cases, you're already there. So if you're creating a Word file or a PowerPoint file, just use the accessibility checker that's inbuilt in Microsoft to and work through those fixes right there. OIT does a wonderful training on accessibility. It's called mining accessibility, something like that. I apologize. I don't remember the exact name, but it's an excellent workshop on how to use the accessibility checker inside Microsoft. So if you use those accessibility checkers in Microsoft and any other software that you use, you're halfway there. Okay, so that's our first tip to you. Secondly, try not to use color or audio to highlight any information. So these two images at the bottom explain what that means. So on the image to the left, which is a syllabus, you'll notice that color has been used to beautify the content. So the headers are very light, as you can see, or maybe not. In a low contrast device, this would not show up at all. Color, unless it is essential like here, is not really a good way to highlight content in any document. So not using color to highlight information, or for example over here on the second image, these two dates have been indicated in a different color, and the purpose is to note when the instructor is out of office. But a screen reader will miss this information. So a student who's using a screen reader will not be able to tell what are these two dates that the instructor is referring to here. So using color or audio to highlight information is always undesirable when it comes to accessibility. Secondly, adding accurate description to images. This image could have been described as a butterfly, but a more accurate description is a monarch butterfly. So accurate descriptions helps. And then the other thing is adding header rows to tables. Tables are the bane of any accessibility checker and invariably uh, throw up bunches of errors. And that's because the header rows of tables are not essentially meant to be accessible unless you make the header row repeat across pages. So that's another tip. And if you're using Office, you will be prompted to do that in your document. So that's the third tip. Some other tips: checking language in your source software is another important thing. So here on the left hand side, this image, for example, shows you where you can check source language of a file, because that's the language in which audio will be created for those alternate formats. Also checking your file titles. If you're working with an existing file and editing it, chances are the title doesn't match what your current file is. So here's where you can check the title of your file and fix it if that's not what your file actually is. Also, and this is a very common one, and this is a syllabus um, that's on the screen ahead of you. Using headings and not just formatting to indicate section titles. Often when we create documents, we realize the importance of creating these headings, to indicate important chunks of text. However, simply making it a different font size and making it boldface does not prepare it for a screen reader. What you'll need to do is make them actual headings so that they show up in this section in the navigation pane. As long as they're showing up in the navigation pane, a screen reader will then indicate that they are headings. This is a syllabus, and the reason I've put it up here is because a lot of our syllabi are not formatted for headings. And so I just put it up here to show you an example of how a syllabus can be made uh, ready for Ally. Just making this one fix in your syllabus will give you 100% score in Ally. So this is another example. The thing is, we have syllabus templates that are accessible, but oftentimes you're not using those templates. You're probably using your templates from the previous semesters. So that's when the issues happen. My goal of showing you these fixes was to just indicate that they're not difficult to do, and Ally will prompt you that they need to be done. So this is just a quick rundown of what you can expect. So next, I'm going to talk about course accessibility reports and then hand it over to June to take us through the demo. So as I said, course accessibility reports are the course level information indicators for your course. So this is an aggregation of everything in your course and how it features in terms of accessibility. So just as you could see an indicator for every item of content, in the same way at the course level as well, you'll see an indicator like this. So on the image here, this is our indicator for the course. So the course is at 47% overall. That's Ally's score. And then it gives you a more detailed breakup of what types of content are in this course that it has checked and um, what needs to be fixed. So here you have two options here. One is you have an option of what to fix first, because the important thing to note about Ally is the goal is not to instantly get your course up to 100%. That's not the goal. The goal is to identify what's critical and needs attention and then fix those first and then work your way through the rest. So it will tell you what's easiest to fix versus what's having a low score and therefore needs to be fixed. So you can choose between what you would like to tackle first. Okay, the easy fixes or the critical fixes as they were. And then it also lists the issues here for you. And these are the remaining issues by severity. So you can pick the ones that are critical and fix them first, or rather that's what we recommend you do, and then work on improving the rest. Now, if you're wondering how does Ally decide if they are severe or not, this is how it checks the number of students impacted by that content. In other words, if a content is visible to the entire class versus if you have restricted visibility to just a group. Also frequency of access, and of course the accessibility score on those indicators. So based on all of this, it's coming up with this information for you. So you could either go page by page in your course and fix everything, or you can scoot over to your accessibility report and then just work through the issues from there.